Just for the record, I am not drinking Thai peanut sauce. This is coffee, and I've run out of things to drink coffee out of. Okay. So I am just very dissatisfied with the term free speech. I did a video about this earlier, but I would like to continue talking about it because I think it's important. Here's why. Both of those words, free and then speech, are very ambiguous. And so when you try to understand an ambiguous topic and you do it by merging two ambiguous words, you are not going to get very far. Free speech also has the problem of being a legalistic term, and people use it both in that sense as well as in the social sense. And so the social sense of being, things that happen between people that aren't illegal, but still are self-policing. So I would like to offer another frame to talk about this issue, which for me has been helpful. And this requires me telling a story about camping. So bear with me. I went camping this weekend at Ha Ha Tonka Lake. And my girlfriend and I set up the campground, which she mostly set it up. And then this other person drives up and they start setting up their campground right next to us. And they do the tent thing. And then he sets up this what I can just describe as an entertainment area with a roof. And he's got his car there and speakers. And as it starts to get dark, he blares terrible stand-up comedy. I don't know if he had set up a television or whether he was just listening to it on his phone, but it just covers the entire campground. All you can hear is just, Dan Cook or whoever it was. What a terrible thing to do to somebody or to the entire campground, right? There is probably no rule in the campground that he might have been violating. Maybe there was. I don't know. Nobody enforced it. But this is a new thing that people can listen to music and media in public space, and that most people understand it's an imposition on other people doing this, but seemingly not everybody, right? And so, I've been camping many times. I don't think I've ever remember having this problem. So it's like most people negotiate this issue just fine on their own. They don't need to be told you can't do this. They just understand that people come out into nature to listen to nature sounds and to get away from things like this. But there are always those few people that don't. And so the question becomes, do you need to develop laws to deal with this behavior? And in this case, it would be the laws of this particular campground, which is, the people that run it would have to get enough complaints where they then have to realize that this is a problem and then take action and then, post rules about, hey, you can listen to music, but maybe not after it gets dark, or don't listen to any music at all, or whatever it wants to do. And then you have to have somebody there to enforce it. It's kind of a pain in the ass, especially when it's something that happens infrequently. But this dynamic of the campground, this kind of the tragedy of the commons is a way economists talk about this issue, really started to make me think about how this applies to issues of speech and the internet. Now think about, just think about online space as if it's a campground, right? There's a bunch of random people there you're sharing public space with. And in a campground setting, we have at least some understanding of what people are going to that space to do. Camping, right? It's not at all clear, and the specificity with which we can think of human beings come to this space to do these particular things gives us a model that we can use to shape our behavior in relationship to those people. Now think of social media as a context. And then the first question being, what is this for? What do people come to this space to do? And I don't think anybody has a good answer for that. Like, some people, it's all over the place. People are using it for all different reasons. And because of that, when there are things posted online that make us uncomfortable, or just generally cause us some anxiety over what to do with this thing that we just saw, we view it, I think, in a similar way as this kind of pollution, this noise pollution. Somebody blaring stand-up comedy at 3 a.m. In a park. It's like, we view that as, this person has violated a norm. And there is this strange imposition of, when you post something on social media, you are posting it into the context of other people, having little idea of what context their social media feed is and how they use it. Are they just there to post pictures of dogs and cats, or their babies, or are they a highly political person that is just posting nonstop about whatever issue they find particularly important? Is somebody using it to try to find a date? Is somebody using it as a forum to really try to find people to discuss ideas with? Is somebody using it just to amuse themselves and kind of troll people and take everything they say totally unseriously? Not apparent, right? And because we don't have an agreed upon understanding of what people go to the space to do, it's much harder to understand what is acceptable, right? And these social norms that usually develop in spaces such as campgrounds, I think, are having a much harder time figuring themselves out in these online spaces. That's not to say they're not doing it. And generally, I am positive about, or I am optimistic about our ability to eventually negotiate this. Like, you do see pushback. People say, hey, it's rude to listen to a song or listen to a podcast when you're just walking down the street on your phone and let everybody else listen to it. That seems to be a norm that people are pushing, that says, hey, that's rude, don't do it, we don't like it. And so I do think these things will be negotiated. But one of the contentious points is thinking about ideas as if they are also pollution and garbage that needs to be removed from this public space. It's uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable to see somebody post something that disagrees with your worldview. If you are somebody who cares deeply about environmental issues and you see somebody post something that's entirely dismissive of how you feel or how, what you believe is happening in the world, that's a particular emotion of seeing somebody who not only disagrees with you, but does so flippantly. And so maybe you view that as pollution in your space and you want to have it removed. Which is not unreasonable, right? We look at our phones all the time. I look at my phone all the time. If I was made uncomfortable and had an uneasy experience every single time I looked at my phone, I would have a lot more anxiety in my day. It'd probably make people stop looking at their phones. But instead, what we do is we kind of go about the strategy of removing the things that make us very uncomfortable. And the question then is, where do you draw the line in terms of ideas that challenge what you think, right? So if you can, let's just take this by degree. So one person could post something like, there's no such thing as global warming, you stupid tree huggers, Trump 2020. Maybe based on that, you think that you are not going to have a reasonable conversation with that person about this issue. It's reasonable, right? But then let's say you scroll down and the next person posts something like, I think global warming exists, but I just think it's happening at a slower pace, and I don't think the catastrophic future that is being pushed out there is necessarily going to happen. Well, let's say you also disagree with that, and that makes you uncomfortable, right? So it's like, well, is that person a troll that is just saying that to, or do you view that as a particularly dangerous belief? Well, maybe, right? So you block that person. And then the next person, you scroll down and they say, well, I do think global warming is an important issue. I think it's happening. It is happening at the rate, and it's one of the central things we need to deal with. But the way we need to deal with it is through the regulation of capitalism. And capitalism is great. It's done a lot of things for us that I want to keep, but let's try to just curtail the downsides through regulation. Well, maybe you don't agree with that. Maybe you view capitalism as this ultimate evil that needs to be done away with, and that there is no solution to this problem besides that. So then that idea also kind of grates on you, right? And it's kind of uncomfortable to read through someone's argument about that. So then you block that person, right? And so at what point do we accept the discomfort? I don't know. I think it's important. I've changed my mind about very substantial views in relationship to the internet. I've found information online. My early understanding of behavioral economics and social psychology and priming research, and what that had to say about human behavior has totally changed in relationship to listening to other people's arguments. My understanding of evolutionary psychology and the conflicts that it has with anthropology in terms of evo-psych making maybe overly simplistic claims that don't exactly match up with the anthropological record of how tribal societies are organized, right? That's an idea that I was exposed to by people who disagreed with other people that I was following. And so these contentious online arguments, some of them happening not in great faith, and became personal. Nevertheless, I did get something out of it, and it did change the way I think about the world. So for me, but again, this is because of the way that I look at social media and use it. I look at social media and use it. When I first started, I really thought of these as places to discuss ideas, almost like a Greek forum, where you could finally just debate people and have access to all these different minds so we can think through. That was the most appealing thing to me about this platform. And so that's how I look at it. That's how, it's when I go camping, I want to listen to nature sounds and build a fire and sleep in a tent, go swimming in the lake. Like, that's what I want out of that experience. What I want out of this experience, debate people, listen to ideas, get a clearer understanding of what's going on, right? But that view conflicts with what other people are using it for. And the whole point of talking about this is, I think we get into a point in which people are in this public space together and everyone kind of looks at the other person. Well, not everyone, but people have a tendency to look at the other person in the way that they're using this space and think of them as if they are this asshole who has showed up in the campground and is blaring their music at 3 a.m. People whose feeds are interrupted by these, what they consider objectionable ideas. And then on the other side, people who watch other people go after their employment and try to get them fired because they disagree with their ideas on the internet, right? All of those things are considered extremely rude. They're not illegal, right? This is just behavior in which a certain subset of the population has been like, I don't like this. I think this is a rude way to behave in public space. And so, the question then becomes, do we need laws to be made to say, well, maybe we should pass a law that, you can't be fired for posting an idea on social media from your job. We need to have stronger, employment laws, right? That was one of the ideas that got thrown around after this whole free speech debate. And I can see that working in some capacity. But what I would much rather happen is to negotiate this issue with the people in the space, right? And to come to this understanding. It's like social media has only been around for so long. Everybody's kind of like trying to figure out what to use this thing for. And it's, we are living in the kind of the splintering of these different ways to express yourself, and the contexts are becoming more distinct. It's like, what do you post on Instagram, as opposed to what do you post on Twitter, as opposed to what do you post on Facebook, as opposed to what do you post on blah, 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 right? Each one is kind of taking on its own distinctive culture. And then there's all sorts of subcultures within those platforms. And so I think what's going to happen, despite the is that we are in the process of making these more distinct and more specific about what you're supposed to do in particular spaces. And that's kind of the way forward. And that these general dumping grounds of content are really going to fade away. And that we can go to specific spaces to do specific things, like sit in our tent and drink a beer, or sit by the fire and drink a beer, and listen to nature sounds. And that everybody in that space is kind of on the same page, and that it's going to then reduce the conflict that exists in this online environment. This peanut sauce is really good.